Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Sami Yusuf Ayad. I'm an internal communications manager at Al-Fihri Open University. And today's topic is statelessness. To introduce the speaker, today's speaker is Ms. Raquel Menezes. She's a migration lawyer and scholar from Brazil with a master's degree in migration and intercultural relations from the University of Oldenburg. Through her academic career, she studied migration in Brazil, Germany, Norway, and South Africa, with a focus on statelessness and integration. In the last 7 years, she has provided legal aid to migrants in several countries and currently works as an independent lawyer in migration affairs and as a human rights advisor in the Ministry of Human Rights in Brazil. So just to give the audience a brief introduction for the topic, statelessness is also sometimes referred to as an invisible problem because stateless people often remain unseen and unheard. They often aren't allowed to go to school, see a doctor, get a job, open a bank account, buy a house, or even get married. Denial of these rights impacts not only individuals concerned, but also society as a whole. Because in particular, excluding an entire sector of the population can lead to social tensions and significantly impair economic and social development. So to give you further detail for this topic, I'll be handing over now to our speaker. Ms. Anna, you can begin.
So hello, everybody. I'm Anna, and I'm going to talk today about statelessness and, a worldwide problem, right? So what is statelessness? This is what my mother asked me, and everybody in my family asked me when I first when I told them I was gonna write my master thesis about it. Then what I had to answer them was that stateless people are people without a state. And they couldn't really understand that because I'm from Brazil, also my family is from Brazil, and everybody who was born here is automatically Brazilian. And then it would mean, it made no sense to my family and to some friends that someone is born in a country and actually they're not nationals of that country. But then I'll explain a little bit about that. So let's start with the concept of statelessness. So the 1954 Convention relating to the status of stateless people says the term stateless person means a person who is not considered as a national by any state under the operation of its law. So it's actually, it's exactly a person who has no nationality. And then I would ask, what is nationality? Why is that so important, right? So nationality is the legal bond between an individual and a state. So it's a formal or political link, a formal link, which can be political or legal. And then nationality is defined in two ways, mainly. So it's defined over the soil or over the blood. And then when you have the jus soli criterion, this is a criterion that some countries adopt to say that in order to be a national of that country, you need to be born in that territory. For example, Brazil. If you are born in Brazil, you are a Brazilian national. And some countries, on the other hand, say that in order to be a national of that country, you need to have parents who are nationals of that country, right? So some countries in Europe, you could say that if I was born in one of those countries in Europe, but my parents are not nationals of that country, then I would have to say that I'm not a national because these are the rules. And this is the thing that each country has the sovereignty to decide which rules are going to apply for their concession of nationality. And then why is nationality important? It's important because it entails rights and duties to the nationals. For example, some of the rights are the right to return and reside in that country, political rights, for example, the right to vote, protection in abroad. So if I'm abroad, my country, if I'm out of my country and I need help, or I'm arrested and I'm going under trial and I need representation, I can call my country, call the embassy and say, hey, I need help. This is also a right for people who are national of a country, and access to public services. So if I'm a national, I have access to health services, to education. I'm sorry about it's really noisy in here. I'm really sorry about that. I hope it doesn't disturb us too much. Anyway, so access to public services, including education and health services. And some of the rights that nationals have regarding their countries are paying taxes, military service, and obeying the laws. Pretty obvious, but well, that's not what I want to focus on. So what happens if you are a stateless person, or what happens if you have no nationality? All those rights I was saying before, they virtually do not exist. I'm not saying that people don't have those rights, but what I'm saying is that there is no country to guarantee those rights to those persons. So stateless people hardly have government issued identification, for example, a passport, so they cannot leave the country. Property owning, they usually cannot own property. They usually cannot access healthcare, public healthcare, or even private healthcare, because how can you go to a doctor and not showing your document, your ID, and saying, hey, this is me, this is my name, these are my parents, this is my age. Anyway, children have a hard time enrolling school because they also have no ID, and their parents usually have no IDs. Formal jobs also are really hard to get. And then all these lead to exclusion, really hard feelings, really bad feelings of not belonging, vulnerability, because there is no institutional, no country to claim these people, to fight over them. How do you go to court and say, hey, I want to sue someone, I want to sue my employer because he's being abusive? It's really hard. It's really complicated. Then detention, and detention is coming from the lack of right to reside in that country. So if you are a stateless person, you are usually illegal in the country where you were born. It's like you are an irregular migrant in the country where you were born, right? It's a really complicated situation. Then sometimes stateless people go through successive detentions and successive deportations because they keep being deported, but there is no country to deport them to, so they keep on being arrested. They're not released because there's nowhere to release them to. It's a really awful situation. And the vulnerability can lead to slavery or situations that are analogous to slavery because of the lack of ensuring to their working rights. And well, this is really bad for the economy also, because you have the whole sector of the economy who is not contributing to the economy. Of course, they would like to, but they cannot. And these deportations can also cause problems, international problems for countries that keep deporting to one another. Then, which are the most affected communities in the world? Some of them, I decided to list them here, and it's not in order. It's not like these are the most, but these are some of the. And well, in the world, the UNHCR estimates that we have over 10 million stateless people. I have seen an estimate of 12 million people also by UNHCR, but then as I've seen this one more often, I decided to include this estimate here. Well, Palestinians are said to be the largest stateless community in the world. I have been to Palestine last year and I talked to a friend, a Palestinian friend, and he was telling me that he was born a Palestinian in the state of Israel, and he had to take an oath to the flag and learn how to speak Hebrew in order to be a national of a country, which would be Israel, because he could not be a national of Palestine there. So it involves a lot of personal issues, a lot of cultural issues. It's really complicated. We also have the Rohingya in Myanmar, the Roma people in the Balkans. I had this internship in Macedonia, North Macedonia. And in there, one of the biggest problems we had regarding stateless people were the Roma community, because they were not able to register their children because they themselves were not registered. So it's an intergenerational problem of statelessness. The grandfather, the father, the child, everybody is stateless, and you cannot get out of that cycle unless the state does something regarding that. And I would also like to cite the Bidun in Kuwait. So the question that everybody always makes, the question everybody always makes is, how does someone become stateless, right? If everybody's born somewhere, how can someone not have a nationality? So this happens because not all countries, as I said, not all countries provide nationality based on the fact that a person was born there. So I'm going to give some examples here. In state succession, we have, so the case of Yugoslavia, right? Yugoslavia was a state, and then it was dissoluted. And once it was dissolved. And from the moment it was dissolved, some people fell into the cracks of nationality laws, and they had a hard time proving that they were nationals of North Macedonia, Slovakia, and other countries that used to form Yugoslavia. Through marriage and divorce, it happens a lot that in order to marry a man, a woman has to give up her nationality. So if I married a man of a country that demands that, I would have to give up my Brazilian nationality in order to acquire his nationality. However, in these countries, if I divorce my husband, I would lose that nationality. Only that I don't have the Brazilian nationality anymore. So during this time, I can be stateless. And if my country says, no, you're not going to be Brazilian again, or if it says you cannot have your nationality back, I would be stateless because of marriage and divorce. In the case of Roma people, we would have stateless parents. So with stateless parents, it's really hard to register children, because if you are stateless, well, it's going to be really hard to register them, because you cannot. How are you going to insert your nationality to a new document if you have no nationality? I hope you understand what I mean. Well, there's also in 27 countries there is the gender discriminatory nationality laws, and in these countries women cannot transfer nationality. So if I am a woman from, for example, Pakistan, and I will have I married, or I want to have a child with a stateless man, this child probably will be stateless, because if the father doesn't have a nationality and I cannot transfer nationality because I am Pakistani, a Pakistani woman, then the child would be stateless. There is also the negative conflict in nationality laws. It's one of the most known causes for statelessness, which is, for example, stateless parents or a stateless woman, if they are unable to transfer nationality and they have a child in a place that has no jus soli, so this place depends on jus sanguinis. This place says my nationals are only my nationals if their parents are my nationals. So with a stateless parents, or with a woman who is unable to transfer nationality plus a stateless man, the person would be stateless. It's the case of Japan and some countries in Europe, as I've said before. So what is the international protection we have today for stateless people, right? So first, the most important thing to say is that due to sovereignty, countries have the discretion to determine whether people are going to be or not nationals of their country. So it's a prerogative they have, no one can force them. However, they are subordinated to some treaties, some international treaties to which they have acceded. And then these treaties bring some limits to the concession of nationality. And this is how the treaties work. So you would have discretion versus subordination. I'm going to speak with examples. So the first document we have, international document we have, which is important to the statelessness framework, is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which in its Article 15 says that every human right has every person has the right to a nationality. And this is the basis for several other instruments. We also have the Convention relating to the status of refugees. And this applies to stateless refugees. So these are people who, besides being refugees, besides being persecuted on grounds of race, opinion, several other factors, they are also stateless people. In the convention, also, we have the Convention on the Status of Stateless Persons. And this is a very important convention because it sets the minimum standards for the treatment to stateless persons in a territory. So when a country has acceded to the convention, it is bound to treat the stateless people in that territory according to the minimum standards, according to the rights. For example, stateless people have the right to education, have the right to healthcare, and it's complicated because we know that in practice that's not how it happens, but there is a convention regarding that. And 1961, we have, for me, the most important convention, which is the Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness. And in this convention, this convention for me is the most effective because it provides directions on nationality laws. So for example, it says, it urges countries to establish a jus soli criterion so that everybody who's born in that country is already born with a nationality, and they wouldn't have a problem with having to find parents or grandparents that could give them the link to another country and therefore a nationality, right? Also, they have this recommendation to countries that they do not strip people of nationality if they know that this person would become stateless. So some people have 2 nationalities or 3. So what it says is, don't take this, for a person who has 2, it says, don't take this nationality of a person if this person won't have another one, right? So this is another, I would say, mechanism for diminishing the occurrence of statelessness. Then we have some campaigns on statelessness, and we'll talk a little bit about the I Belong campaign to end statelessness by 2024. This campaign is by the UNHCR, and it started on 2014. It's going until 2024, and the idea is to end statelessness completely in 10 years. It's a pretty ambitious campaign, but it's really interested. It's been having a very, it's been having a loud voice, and we've been hearing about that in several different ways, social media, on TV, etc. And the I Belong campaign released a document called the Global Action Plan to End Statelessness, and then it gives 10 actions and these actions are aiming to resolve, prevent, and protect people who are in the statelessness, who are stateless. And then we have this Instagram picture that I put here. This is Maha Mamu. So Maha was, she is a special case. She is today a volunteer ambassador for the I Belong campaign for UNHCR. And Maha's case is that her parents are Syrian. They were married in Syria. However, they are an interreligious couple. So her mom is Muslim and her father is Christian. So in Syria that was not allowed, and their marriage was never recognized. So they fled to Lebanon, and they went to Lebanon, and there they had Maha, Suad, and Edward, their three children. And however, the three children could never be registered, and they were stateless. Why is that? Because in Lebanon, you are only Lebanese if your father is Lebanese. In their case, the father was Syrian, and they could not have Lebanese nationality because the father was not Lebanese, and they could also not have Syrian nationality because the marriage was not recognized. And then they were considered children out of wedlock. So they were in a limbo. They could not have either of the nationalities. However, Maha tried to contact several countries in the world in order to talk about this topic and to have a nationality and to be able to become a national of a country. And she could finally get in touch with Brazil. And due to a law that we had, well, Brazil decided to receive Syrian people or people affected by the Syrian war in 2014 because of the crisis, the very great crisis that they were having there. And due to that, she could come to Brazil as a person who was affected by the Syrian war. And once she arrived in Brazil, sometime after she learned how to speak Portuguese, and sometime after, a new law was launched, which is called the New Migration Law. It's from 2017, but it's still called the New Migration Law. And from the New Migration Law, she was able to be naturalized Brazilian. And I'm talking about that case, not because I want to promote the state of Brazil. I don't. I'm speaking of that because this is the case, that Maha's case was the case that made me decide to study statelessness and to write my master's thesis on statelessness, because I saw all the links. So I wanted to talk about the Middle East, about statelessness, and about Brazil, and I found all this in Maha's case. Then I'm going to speak very, very briefly about good practices which I found in Brazil because I studied that topic specifically. Good practices can be found in several other countries. For example, in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan has an interesting example of good practices too. But I'm going to speak about Brazil because I graduated as a lawyer in Brazil, and this is the country where I could study, where I could, this is the country whose laws I could speak of a little bit, right? So in the new migration law and in the legal framework on statelessness in Brazil, I could find three mechanisms of statelessness, of eradicating statelessness. So the first is the mixed criterion for concession of nationality at birth. What does it mean? So it means that Brazil has several, Brazil has two ways of providing nationality. One of them is through jus soli. So if you are born in Brazil, you can be considered a Brazilian person just by that. You don't need to have Brazilian parents. You are considered a Brazilian person. And also, if you are Brazilian, if you are born to Brazilian parents abroad, you can also be considered a Brazilian national. So you can see that it's a broad gamut of possibilities to become. It's not only by this or only by that. It's relatively easy to be a Brazilian national. And if it's easier to be a national, it's harder to be a stateless. You understand what I mean? Second is a statelessness determination procedure. So this is a recommendation of the conventions on of statelessness. The statelessness determination procedure is a specific procedure that is created to determine whether someone is stateless or if this person is not stateless. And what is the point here? Why is it important to determine if a person is or not stateless? Because allow me to say that if you have a disease but you don't know if you are sick but you don't know you are sick, how are you going to be healed? You understand what I mean? So if a person doesn't know whether they could be a national, for example, of Macedonia or of the United States or whatever, if they don't know, how are they going to do something for themselves in terms of trying to naturalize? So this procedure through this procedure, the government will try to identify and to investigate the links that this person has to different states. And if these links are enough for this person to be a national of any of them. If this person is not considered a national of any of the states, then comes the third mechanism, and there is the facilitated naturalization, which is it's a mechanism for specific for stateless people, stateless persons, that would allow them to become naturalized more easily than with a lot less requirements and demanding a lot less documents than it would demand for regular people who are nationals of other countries, right? So from the second and the third mechanisms, Maha and her sister and other people could be naturalized Brazilian from 2018. Well, then I would like to recommend some material if you would like to study a little bit more about statelessness. Then I would recommend Statelessness in the Caribbean from Belton. It's a really interesting book, and she talks a lot about the stateless people who are not migrants. So they are stateless in the place where they were born. Maybe they will never leave that country, but they will keep on being stateless there. And this is a very hard problem. Second is Mahamama's book. If you can read in Portuguese, then I recommend this book. It's The Struggle of a Stateless Person for the Right to Exist. It was released last year, and it's a really interesting book. So the third book, it's my book. It's going to be released this month and will begin being sold next month. Everything I said here today is the first chapter of my book. Of course, it's a very big summary of the first chapter of my book. So this was my master's thesis, which I turned into a book, and I'm releasing because I want people to know more about statelessness and to know more about good practices under the UNHCR parameters, which is, this is my research, right? And I also present a little, in chapter 3, I also present a philosophical analysis on Hannah Arendt's right to have rights and how that applies to stateless people, and also on Ben Habib's interpretation of Hannah Arendt's right to have rights. So it's more of a philosophical analysis for those who like it. Anyway, there's also the Netflix drama series called Stateless. It's becoming really famous. It has the support of UNHCR, if I'm not mistaken. It's really good. It's available on Netflix. And the handbook on the protection of stateless persons, which is one of the several handbook books by the UNHCR. They are the biggest reference on the topic. The UNHCR, of course, they have a mandate for statelessness, and they are the biggest reference. So I would recommend their handbooks. Well, this is, I will just briefly show. This is the cover of my book. So Statelessness, Theory, Analysis, and Good Practices from Brazil. And you can see under it, it's my email. So in all slides, you can see my email. And please get in touch with me. You can always tell me news about the topic. I would love to hear more about it and ask questions or ask for literature regarding the topic. I have really researched a lot, and my book has over 10 pages of lists of literature, and then it would be a pleasure to share that with everybody, because statelessness is something that needs to be talked about. It's one of the worst conditions of that people can be in, and this is why I feel really responsible for talking more about it and spreading the word. So I want to say thank you to all of you for watching my lecture, and it's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Sami, and that's it. Wishing you all a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Yes, Ms. Menezes, like there are some questions we would like to ask you if you have time. Sure. First question is, are there any legal instruments on statelessness?
If there are any legal instruments on statelessness? Sorry? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You asked me if there are any legal instruments on statelessness?
Yes.
Yes, there are these treaties that I talked about. These are all legal instruments on statelessness, only that they are international instruments. So they can only have force if the countries have acceded to them. So if a country has not acceded to these treaties, they have no force, unfortunately. But these are so specifically on statelessness, we have the Convention on the Status of Stateless Persons and the Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness. These are the most important.
All right, the second question is, who are the worst affected stateless people? Like, what country is it the worst?
Can you just repeat that, please?
Who are the worst affected stateless people?
The worst affected. That's a really hard question. I don't know if anyone could ever answer that, because each country has a difficult, each situation provides different circumstances. So for example, the Palestinians in Palestine, who are in Palestine, they have to face what could be called the oppression of another country, which would be Israel, and they have to take an oath to a flag that is could be considered by them their enemies, you see. And then you would have the Bidun in Kuwait, who would have other problems, and some people in Bangladesh would have other problems. Each situation provides different kinds of hardship. So I couldn't say who are the people who are worstly affected.
Okay, another question is, can we consider stateless someone who gave up his or her nationality?
Someone who, sorry?
can we consider a person to be stateless if they gave up their nationality?
Yes, if a person, some people give up their nationalities. The treaties, the 1961 treaty on statelessness says, it recommends strongly that that countries do not allow people to give up their nationalities. Still, some people do want to do that because of marriage, for example, so they can give up their nationality in order to marry someone else whose country demands them not to have the second nationality. And some people do that in protest. So if I'm not mistaken, Albert Einstein, he gave up his nationality. I read that really briefly. So if I'm not mistaken, he did give up his nationality and he was stateless for a while. And some people just say that in protest, I don't want to be part of any of that. I don't want to be part of this very big exclusion, which is the world of nationality. And I will give up being a national. And they can do that. And they, yes, become stateless people.
The next one is a bit of a long question. It's, can we consider political refugees as stateless? And it's followed by what makes the Brazilian government one of the good destinations for stateless people? Like, why not other countries? What can Europe learn from Brazil?
So, as I said, Brazil would not be the only place for stateless people to go. Of course, that would be too much, too presumptuous and silly of me to say. But as you asked, what could Europe learn from Brazil would be the good practices, which I said. So as good practices, we have these three mechanisms, right? First, and the most important of all for me, is the concession of nationality upon birth in the territory. So jus soli would be something so important if all countries had the jus soli criterion and accepted that everybody who is born there is a national there. Statelessness would be ended so much faster, and the world would be a much better place. Something else is the facilitated naturalization, that once you are defined, once you are identified as a stateless person, you can be naturalized easier in comparison to other people who already have a nationality. Also the rights. So once you are stateless in Brazil and you are considered a stateless person, you acquire a number of rights which you would not acquire in other countries. I'm not saying it's a perfect system, and this is the law. I'm not researching on whether all of this works in practice or how people are being protected by the country. This is a legal research, so anyway, it's more than we could find in several countries.
Mm-hmm. Well, can a stateless person also be a refugee?
Can you repeat that?
Can a stateless person also be a refugee?
Yes, a stateless person can be a refugee.
This is based on the Rohingya who are fleeing Myanmar. Like, they're stateless in their own country, but they're now refugees. That's why I asked the question.
Well, actually, I wouldn't focus specifically on the Rohingya to answer that question, but people who are stateless can also be refugees when they fit both of the qualifications, both of the concepts of refugee and stateless. So if they are a person without nationality who are in a country of, for example, a great violation of of human rights. For example, Venezuela. Venezuela is now having a massive violation of human rights. And if a person is there and has to flee Venezuela because they are facing that specific problem, but they also don't have a nationality, so they are a stateless refugee, yes.
Another question is, how long does it take to guarantee a stateless person a nationality? Like, what are the common needed documents or procedures for that to happen?
Where you?
Generally.
In general, well, each country has a different criteria, but usually, so it's really hard to ask documents for stateless people because they most of the time have no documents. So I think it would be something based on, give me all the documents you have and let's see what we can do, you know? And about the time, about how long it takes, it depends from country to country. In Brazil, you need to prove that you have been living in Brazil for 2 years. No, it doesn't have to be legally. You just have to prove that you've been living in Brazil for 2 years, and that and you can give whichever document you have besides this one, because you cannot require, for example, a birth registration from a stateless person, because from being stateless, this person will not have a birth registration.
All right, the final question I have for you today. What are the current efforts on tackling statelessness, besides the mentioned instruments? Besides the instruments that you mentioned in your presentation, what are the current efforts on tackling statelessness?
There are other campaigns. There are internal campaigns. For example, as I said, Kazakhstan had a very interesting campaign. But to be honest, most of them are. Sorry, I think I can find this answer here. So this is my book. This is what I'm sharing. I honestly don't remember in my mind other campaigns, but I know that I have written about them. Sorry, it's a big book, but I'll find the answer. Okay, so I Belong is the most ambitious campaign. So we also have the Global Campaign for Equal Nationality, which was launched in 2014, and it's composed of NGOs in the local, regional, and international level, academics, UN agencies, and employs national and global advocacy, knowledge sharing, and research to mobilize action, stress gender discrimination, nationality laws, which is a very important topic, and yeah, I could definitely create a new slide regarding that if it's your interest. But honestly, the I Belong is the most important, is the biggest campaign on that, and this is why I chose to talk only about that.
All right, thank you for answering the question. I would like to thank our speaker, Ms. Raquel Menezes, for coming tonight and speaking about a very serious topic. This was a very insightful presentation, and it really talks about, it really explains in detail what stateless is and the problem it causes. And like Ms. Menezes suggested, feel free to view the presentation and see about the books that she mentioned. I would like to thank everyone that will be viewing this event, and I also like to state that this is going to be recorded on FAO's social media account for all those who cannot view it on time and who want to view it in the future. Ms. Menezes mentioned that her email is present in the video, and I also like to state that that you can ask questions in the comment section on FAO social media, and we'll be providing these questions for Ms. Menezes to answer and get back to you as soon as possible. Once again, thank you for attending this meeting, and I hope you have a good day, Ms. Menezes. And I hope everyone else has a good day as well. Goodbye.
Bye.